Welcome to our lecture series on the age of absolutism. Today we're going to be focusing on the Netherlands here at Learning the Social Sciences. The Netherlands was a unique country during the age of absolutism. Why? Well, they were a republic in a sea of monarchies in Europe. Now, the province of Holland traditionally dominated their States General, and their States General was the central government of the Netherlands, much like if you would have Parliament or Congress rule the country. That was the States General. However, if you needed an executive branch, if you needed a kind of a rent-a-monarch, they always had the House of Orange to call upon. For example, the House of Orange with William the Silent was highly influential in gaining the Netherlands their independence from Spain. And of course, with Maurice too, helping from the House of Orange to gain independence. Now, whenever they needed somebody to come in, for example, if France invaded, they could always call upon that house to be an executive branch for the time period to just expedite all of the processes if a time of trouble happened. Now, the government was Republican, but it was mainly like a confederation run by wealthy merchants and financiers. They had a strong middle class value, though, and the States General was their federal assembly. And in terms of the offices, you would have the Stadtholder. They would be your representatives from each province that would go then to assist the running of the country and maintaining order. In terms of local government, you would have your elected officials be called a regent. Now, the Dutch had a strong economy in the 1600s and 1700s. Amsterdam was the world's leading port and commercial center. They had a navy larger than the English fleet. They had around 15,000 vessels, which is why they were able to also become a colonial powerhouse. They were able to go and get various territories from various parts of the world. They were trading in spices, for example, like pepper, silks and cottons, and of course, the ever precious tulip, which we'll be referring to in a later lecture. Amsterdam's banking, credit, and warehousing facilities were unmatched within Europe, and they were able to really keep their tabs on inflation. So while their economy was booming, they kept inflation just kind of under wraps, unlike, for example, Spain, which had an inflation problem from time to time. Now, in 1602, the Dutch created the Dutch East India Company. Now, remember, this is during the period of mercantilism. So it's quite different than capitalism, but you are going to always want to try to have profitable trade. And so we're also in the era of tariffs. And you're also in this era where you are going to allow these companies to be established that have so much power compared to what you would ever give a company today in 2020. So, for example, the Dutch East India Company was empowered to be able to make war treaties, to actually conduct then war. They could go and seize foreign ships, be their own pirates. They could establish colonies, and to help those colonies, they could go and coin their own money. This is a very different age. However, it's something that does make the actual government a little bit less powerful in terms that they are always going to have to bail out these big companies. This is why in the future, an individual by the name of Adam Smith up in Scotland is actually going to create a system called capitalism, because for him, he didn't like these companies that had so much power over the government, because you really could never let them fail economically, because they would bring the country down with you. Now, when spice trade declined, the Dutch go and rely on fees charged for transporting products from one Asian place to another. For example, Japan is going to close itself off to the outside world, but they allow two nations to conduct trade out of the port of Nagasaki. China, because of course you're going to be getting a lot of rice and other items from China, and they also allow the Dutch to be able to trade there, because the Dutch are, I guess, in a way, almost like the semi-truck drivers of the Pacific Ocean. They are the boats that are going and bringing items from, yes, Europe, Africa, India, the Spice Islands, and other places within Asia. Now, eventually, though, they are going to have a rival develop, and that is going to be the English, who are going to move into plenty of the territories that the Dutch had. For example, the Dutch had a colony in North America, New Amsterdam, and the English will take that over. They will also have a colony down in South Africa, and the Dutch will leave that area. However, the settlers will remain, and then the English will move into that territory. Now, the Netherlands lies below sea level at many various points, and so they are very good at doing what is called land reclamation, and they focus on that in the 1600s and 1700s. They were creating more land by building barriers to keep the water back. They were building flood walls, dikes, canals. They were filling in areas with more dirt. They also were enclosing public lands and making them for private use. Public lands or common lands would be areas where anybody could go and, for example, have their cow graze or plant some extra crops. But now they're kind of saying, hey, we need to use every inch that we have here for producing our own crops and items that are needed. And so the Dutch expanded their agricultural production in the first half of the 17th century. They then, with that increased amount of food, had an increase in population, and they became the most densely populated country within Western Europe, or Europe as a whole. In terms of Dutch society, they had higher salaries than any other place in Western Europe, and including in that, women had higher wages and were involved in the economy to a certain regard. They also had the highest standard of living in Europe, and their real wages were rising. And due to this income, they had a more varied diet. They had more meat, more cheese, and fish than anywhere else within Europe. And they also have these imported items. They are sipping coffee and tea and also having ginger and various other spices. In terms of religion, they were very tolerant for this time period. Again, highlighting for this time period. They were known as being a haven for religious toleration. When times got tough in France for the French Protestants, 60,000 fled to the Netherlands. The Dutch also created the Reformed Church that was a Calvinist-based church. They also allowed Jewish refugees to find a home within the Netherlands. And other various groups, for example, like the Mennonites, will have a period of time in the Netherlands. In terms of schooling, they have the University of Leiden and the University of Groningen. And with that, they had the one spot of learning for Europe. They allowed people that were from various countries to come and study at these universities, and around half of those students then were foreigners. And with this, they, again, are going to be helping their economy, because if you have the best and brightest studying within your country and they like it and they stay, well, of course, they're going to help continue the brilliance of your era. In terms of Dutch culture, the separation of strong provinces did hinder the power of any church to kind of control the intellectual life of the Dutch Republic. And so there's more creativity, more freedom of expression. The Dutch also enjoyed a free press. The very first newspapers printed in Europe are not printed in London or Paris, they're printed in Amsterdam. Of course, though, you have to also look at the age of absolutism. You don't have a monarch that is fearful of what the public is going to say. You have a republic here. And yeah, we all know how elections go and things like that. But you are having a more free society because you are not having, well, a paranoid monarch. We are also going to have some great artists come about here in the Netherlands. Of course, the one that is going to be most known for having his picturesque urban and rural scenes is going to be Rembrandt. But you are also going to have a lot of other artists rising up. And something unique with the Dutch is that you're going to have just a lot of beautiful, intricate paintings where you are going to just see daily life occurring. Now, in terms of wars, of course, they are going to come, and a lot of them come because of a king in France. Louis XIV is somebody who started a lot of wars, and he targeted the Netherlands on numerous occasions. Now, but the Dutch also have their run-ins with the English as they try to defend their commercial interests abroad. Now, of course, we already discussed that they lost New Amsterdam to the English, but they do try to maintain their power in areas, for example, what is like modern day Indonesia. Now, in 1667, Louis XIV, the King of France, imposed high tariffs on the Dutch imports. However, that then is going to be limiting trade a little bit if you go and place high tariffs, and the Dutch have a lot of great goods that people want to buy. And so then in 1672, Louis XIV, instead of taking away those high tariffs, invaded the Dutch Republic. And we are going to have these off and on again wars that we're going to be talking about actually more so when we cover France. And they are going to be, slowing down the economy of the Netherlands and bringing in the time period where they are going to have the House of Orange come in and rule for a period of time. However, in the end, the Dutch are not going to fall to France. They are going to remain their own independent country with their republic in place. So this has been our lecture on the Dutch during the age of absolutism. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.